Hello, friends. Today I want to share a beautiful and heartfelt story with you, a story of love, courage, and hope that will touch your heart. It's about a young soul who dared to follow her heart against all odds, and a journey filled with trials, dreams, and unforgettable moments. This isn't just a story of struggles. It's a story of finding light in the darkest times and discovering that true happiness often comes when we least expect it. So sit back, relax, and let this story take you on a journey full of emotions, joy, and inspiration. If you enjoy it, don't forget to help us reach 1,000 subscribers so this story can reach more hearts, just like yours. Let's begin the story. The year was 1874. Summer lay heavy over the Arizona frontier, turning the sky to brass and the streets of Dust Creek to powder. The sun seemed angry that day, spilling heat down from a cloudless dome, bleaching the color out of everything except the blood-red rocks beyond town. Sheriff Alton Graves stood on the courthouse steps, sweat crawling beneath his collar. In one hand he held a crumpled order from the district judge. In front of him, the townspeople gathered, ranchers, gamblers, rail hands, and a few women with parasols tilted against the glare. They had come for spectacle. Beside the courthouse a man knelt, his wrists bound to a wagon wheel with rawhide. His name, written wrong in the ledger, was Kona. His skin was the color of sun-warmed earth, his dark hair tangled from the long ride from the outpost. He did not bow his head. He stared past the crowd toward the far horizon, silent as a mountain. The sheriff cleared his throat. By order of the territorial court, the prisoner will be hired out to repay his fines. Term not to exceed 60 days. Food and safety are the responsibility of the hire. The crowd shifted. A ranch hand laughed. 60 days? He won't last 6. Ain't worth feeding. A few others chuckled, the sound dry and cruel. Kona didn't move. The sheriff called again. Starting bid, $20. No one answered. Even the wind went still. Then a voice cut through the silence. 42. Heads turned. A carriage stood at the edge of the street, its wheels dusted white. A woman stepped down, gloved hand brushing her skirt. Elara Montrose, the transport magnate's daughter, and the last person anyone expected to see at a prisoner auction. She walked forward, calm as a queen. Her dress was sage green, her eyes clear and level beneath the brim of a traveling hat. "I'll pay the full cost," she said. The sheriff blinked. "Miss Montrose, are you sure you understand what—" "Release him," she interrupted. Coins rang as she placed them in his hand, gold, silver, enough to silence protest. The deputy sliced through Kona's bindings. The rawhide fell, leaving deep marks across his wrists. Elara stepped closer. "You'll come with me," she said quietly. "You'll be paid, fed, and treated fair. When 60 days are done, you'll have your freedom." Kona rose, tall and straight, his shadow stretching long across the dust. His voice was low, careful. "You're not afraid?" Elara's gaze met his. "I'm more afraid of doing nothing." She turned toward her carriage, and he followed, slow and sure. No chains now, just the eyes of Dust Creek burning holes in their backs. As they rode away beneath the dying sun, the wind stirred through the street again, whispering like it carried a secret, one that began with mercy and would end with love. The road from Dust Creek wound north through a dry valley where mesquite and juniper clung to life among stones. Dusk spread purple across the land, and a single hawk rode the last heat rising from the earth. Elara Montrose guided the carriage with steady hands. Behind them, the town had shrunk to a faint glimmer. Silence stretched between her and the man beside her, the Apache with eyes like night. Kona sat upright, his wrists raw but his posture proud. The breeze lifted the torn edge of his shirt, showing scars that spoke of rope, blade, and long captivity. He said nothing, and Elara didn't press him. Some silences were too heavy to touch. After an hour, the road curved toward a rise of green, a rare stand of juniper trees circling the Montrose estate. The big house stood white against the dusky hills, its porch lamps glowing like watchful eyes. Elara drew the reins and slowed. "My father built this place before the drought," she said softly. "He believed the land would always be kind. Lately it's been otherwise." Kona's gaze swept the yard, barn, corrals, a dry trough. "You live here alone?" "My father's ill," she replied. "There are servants, hands enough to keep the place breathing. But the nights here are long." When they reached the gate, a stable boy hurried forward, staring wide-eyed at the man in the wagon. "Miss Ilara." "That's him?" "The one from the courthouse." She dismounted gracefully. "This is Mr. Kona," she said firmly. "He'll be staying 60 days under my word. Tell cook to set a plate for him." The boy hesitated, then ran off, muttering. Inside the yard, the air smelled of hay and iron. Ilara faced Kona squarely. "You may sleep in the tack room for now. Tomorrow we'll see to better quarters. You'll earn wages, same as any hand." He looked toward the low barn. "I don't beg pay. You don't need to," she said. "You'll work. You'll be treated fairly. That's the bargain." He inclined his head slightly, the closest thing to thanks she had seen. As twilight deepened, Ilara climbed the porch steps. From the doorway, she turned back. "There's a ridge beyond the house, among the junipers. From there you can see the valley clear to the river. It's where I go when I need to remember who I am." Kona followed her gaze, eyes narrowing. "Juniper strong," he murmured. "Grows even when ground is hard," she smiled faintly. "Yes, that's why I planted them." When the house went quiet and lamps flickered low, Kona walked to that rise. The night wind carried the resin scent of the trees, sharp and clean. He stood beneath them, looking down at the white house, where a single light still burned in an upstairs window. He didn't know yet if he was free or only in a different kind of cage. But the woman who had cut his bonds, she had looked at him without hate, and that in all his years was a beginning. Dawn spilled over the valley like melted gold. The Montrose estate stirred awake with the sound of buckets, horse hooves, and cook's iron pans clanging from the kitchen. Dust rose soft and fine in the morning light. From her window, Ilara Montrose watched as the man called Kona stepped down from the rise among the junipers. He moved with quiet purpose, each step sure, each motion measured. The scars on his wrists had begun to heal, but she knew wounds like his ran deeper than skin. In the yard below, 2 ranch hands whispered as he passed. "She's lost her wits," one muttered. "Bringing an Apache into her house. Maybe he's tame," said the other. "Tame?" The first laughed darkly. "A wolf don't change its teeth." Ilara's jaw tightened. She turned from the window, pulled on her gloves, and went down to meet them. Kona was already at the trough, filling buckets for the horses. She approached with a tin cup in her hand. "You'll want water," she said. He took it with a nod, drinking without hurry. The grooves around his wrists were red but clean. "You understand English well enough?" she asked gently. He met her eyes. "Enough. Then hear me plainly," she said. "My father is unwell. The men who work this land respect him, but not me. You'll help where needed. Repair fences, stand watch at night, nothing more. You'll be paid weekly," he gave a short nod. "And if I choose to leave? Then we'll settle it proper with the sheriff," she replied. "No one here owns you." For the first time, she thought she saw a flicker of something human in his eyes, something like disbelief mixed with gratitude. The days that followed unfolded like quiet ripples in a pond. Kona worked from dawn until the stars came out. He mended the broken hinges on the barn doors, patched holes in the fences, and fetched water from the well, even when no one asked. His silence unsettled some, comforted others. By week's end, even the skeptical foreman admitted, he works like 10 men and asks less than one. Yet every evening, as the sun bled out across the valley, Kona climbed the rise among the junipers and stood watch until night fully claimed the land. The servants called it strange. Ilara thought it steadfast. One night she found herself lighting a lamp in her window before bed, an old habit from childhood, when her mother would leave a flame burning so her father could find his way home. Out among the junipers, the lamp's glow caught in Kona's eyes like a distant star. He stood unmoving, listening to the whisper of branches above him, and for the first time in years, something inside him was still. He didn't yet understand the peace that came with her kindness, nor the pull that began to take root in his chest whenever she looked his way. But he knew this: whatever he was before Dust Creek, the wind beneath these junipers had given him back his name, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of a home. By the second week, word had spread through Dust Creek like wildfire in dry grass. The Montrose girl had taken in an Apache, fed him, paid him, gave him a roof. At the mercantile, tongues wagged as fast as the scales weighed flour. Some called it charity, others called it shame. "She's bewitched," said one ranch wife, shaking her head. A Montrose woman throwing her name in the dirt. At the saloon, men laughed over whiskey glasses. "She'll regret it," someone said. "You can't wash the blood off his kind." Back at the Montrose estate, Ilara ignored the talk as best she could. But gossip has a way of crawling through windows no matter how tightly they're shut. One afternoon, while she was checking ledgers on the porch, a column of dust appeared down the road. The sound of hooves followed, steady and confident. Ilara's heart sank before she even saw his face. Silas Harlow. He dismounted in a cloud of dust, boots striking the earth like hammers. His hat was fine felt, his vest embroidered, too polished for this land. His smile, however, was pure iron. "Ilara," he greeted smoothly. "You're hard to catch at home these days." "I've been busy," she said, rising. "So I've heard." His gaze flicked toward the barn, where Kona was splitting firewood. "Interesting company you keep." Kona didn't pause his work. Each swing of the axe landed clean and precise, wood splitting like thunder under muscle. Silas stepped closer, voice lowering. "You know what people say, don't you? They're whispering your name from here to the church steps. You could end it all, Ilara. A wedding puts gossip to rest faster than prayer." She folded her arms. "And you think I should marry you to quiet them?" He smiled thinly. "You could do worse. My holdings stretch from here to the foothills. I could save this place when your father's debts come due." Ilara's eyes hardened. "I don't recall asking to be saved." Silas's charm cracked, his tone cooling. "You may not have a choice much longer." From the corner of her vision, she saw Kona straighten, the axe resting against his shoulder. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes had turned sharp as flint. Silas noticed and smirked. "Your pet looks restless." "That's enough," Ilara snapped. "You'll leave my property now." Silas's laughter was low and dangerous. "Sooner or later you'll see reason. That man will turn on you, and when he does, don't expect Dust Creek to weep." He mounted and rode off, leaving a trail of dust and tension behind. When the sound of hooves faded, Ilara exhaled slowly. Kona watched her from the yard. "That man brings storm," he said quietly. "Yes," she murmured, her gaze drifting toward the horizon where clouds had begun to gather. "And I fear the storm won't stop with him." That evening, lightning flickered far beyond the mountains. From the rise among the junipers, Kona stood guard as thunder rolled, a low promise of the reckoning still to come. The storm rolled in with the fury of a wounded beast. By dusk, the sky had turned the color of gunmetal, and the air smelled of rain and iron. Ilara Montrose stood on the porch, watching the wind bend the junipers near the ridge. Her father was inside, feverish again, his coughing echoing down the hall. The servants had shuttered windows and tied down loose boards. But the storm showed no mercy. Lightning split the sky, and thunder followed close behind, shaking the earth. In the yard, Kona worked to secure the livestock, muscles tensing against the wind. Rain began in thin sheets, soon turning to a downpour that swallowed the world in sound. He moved like he belonged to the storm itself, steady, unyielding. Ilara grabbed her cloak and ran into the chaos. "Kona!" she called over the roar. "The lower pen, check the latch." He nodded and disappeared into the rain. A few of the ranch hands had already abandoned the yard for the safety of the bunkhouse. She couldn't blame them, but she wouldn't leave until every gate was shut. Then came the scream of wood splitting. Ilara turned just in time to see the wind tear the roof from the tool shed. Boards flew like arrows. She stumbled backward, shielding her face. "Kona!" He appeared through the sheets of rain, grabbed her by the arm, and pulled her clear as a beam crashed where she'd been standing. For a breath, they were pressed together beneath the flash of lightning, the world around them dissolving into wild white light. "You shouldn't be out here," he said. Voice low but fierce. "And leave you to face this alone?" she shot back. He looked at her then, really looked, and for a heartbeat the storm fell away. The rain glistened on her face, her eyes bright with stubborn courage. "You're not like the others," he murmured, almost to himself. Before she could answer, a sound rose from the barn, a frightened neigh, the kind that meant real trouble. Kona turned, instincts sharp. "The horses!" They ran through mud and rain to the big barn where a section of roof had torn loose. One of the beams had fallen, trapping a mare. Without hesitation, Kona braced his shoulder beneath it, straining. The wood creaked, threatening to splinter. "Get her out!" he shouted. Ilara darted in, slicing the reins free. The mare stumbled up and bolted through the rain into the open. Kona shoved the beam aside and collapsed to one knee, breath ragged. She dropped beside him. "You're hurt." "Just tired," he said, shaking his head. Storm's passing, and indeed, as if obeying him, the thunder began to fade, leaving only the soft patter of rain on the earth. Ilara looked at him, mud-slick, soaked and strong, and something shifted deep in her chest. Gratitude, admiration, and something else she dared not name. "Kona," she whispered, "you saved my life." He met her eyes, rain still dripping from his hair. "No," he said quietly, "you saved mine first." Outside, the last lightning flickered and died, leaving only the clean scent of juniper rising from the wet ground, like a promise that the world, somehow, had just changed. Morning came washed clean. The air carried the scent of wet earth and crushed sage, and sunlight dripped from the eaves like melted glass. Ilara stepped out onto the porch barefoot, the boards still damp beneath her feet. The storm had taken one of the smaller sheds and half the fence near the pasture, but the house still stood proud. She drew a slow breath and whispered a silent thank you, to luck, to the land, to the man who had saved her. From the barn came the sound of tools, steady, rhythmic. Kona was already working, sleeves rolled, hands sure. "Does he ever rest?" she murmured with a faint smile, gathering her skirts and walking toward him. He looked up as she approached. The morning light caught the edges of his face, carving strength from shadow. "You should be resting," she said. "You were hurt." "I've known worse," he replied. She leaned against the doorframe. "You lifted that beam alone. It could have killed you." His eyes softened just a little. It didn't. For a moment, the quiet between them felt alive, like something delicate waiting to be named. Ilara took a small step closer. "When the storm broke, I thought I'd lose everything. My father, the horses, the land, and then you appeared out of the rain." Kona returned to hammering the fence post, his voice low. "You have courage. Storms only find the brave." She smiled at that, softly, privately. "You speak like someone who's seen too many of them." He paused, gaze distant. "I have. Some leave scars you can't see." Her heart ached at the quiet pain in his words. "Then maybe this land can heal some of them," she said gently. "It's healed worse things before." He didn't answer, but his eyes met hers. And something unspoken passed between them, an understanding, fragile as morning light but real. Later, when the chores were done and the sun began to lean west, Ilara brought him water and a slice of warm bread from the kitchen. He accepted it with a nod, his fingers brushing hers briefly, just enough for her to feel the roughness of his skin and the warmth that startled her heart into a faster rhythm. He ate quietly, sitting on the fence rail, watching a hawk wheel above the valley. "In my tongue," he said after a while, "there's a word for the place where storms rest. It means peace after battle." "What's the word?" she asked. He hesitated. "Neshkai." She tried it on her lips, careful and curious. "Neshkai." Kona smiled faintly, the first real smile she had seen from him. "You say it right." For a long time they simply sat together, the wind moving softly through the junipers. Somewhere behind them, her father coughed from his sickbed, the sound fading into the distance. The land had survived another storm. So had they, and though neither dared speak it, both knew something had shifted forever, something as sure as the sunrise and as tender as hope. For 3 days after the storm, the Montrose house held a kind of hush, half peace, half unease. The air smelled of fresh lumber and wet grass, and the sound of hammering had become part of the rhythm of their days. Ilara spent her mornings tending to her father, who had finally woken from his fever. The old man's hair was white as the cottonwoods along the creek, and his voice had grown soft, as though too many years of command had worn it thin. "Ilara," he rasped one morning, eyes opening to the light. "How long have I slept?" "Too long," she said, smiling with relief. "But you're safe now. The storm's passed." He turned his head toward the window, where the junipers shimmered in the sun. "And the house?" "The stock? All mended. Thanks to help I hired." Something flickered in his eyes, a spark of old suspicion. "Help?" Ilara hesitated. "His name is Kona. He's been working the fences and watching the herd. He saved my life when the shed collapsed." The silence stretched between them like a taut wire. "An Apache?" he asked finally. "Yes," she said simply. Her father's hand clenched weakly at the edge of the blanket. "Ilara, you don't understand their kind. They bring ruin. Your mother—" He broke off, coughing hard, the memory cutting like glass. She placed a gentle hand on his arm. "He's not what you think, father. He's kind, honest. He's done more good here in 2 weeks than half the men you've paid in years." His gaze softened, not from agreement, but from love for her. "You've got your mother's heart," he whispered. "Too open for this world." Later that afternoon, she brought Kona into the house. He stood tall but respectful at the threshold of her father's room, hat in hand. "Sir," he said quietly. The old man studied him, every line of his face, every scar. Finally, he nodded toward the chair. "You worked through the storm?" "Yes," Kona replied. "For pay." "For a promise," Kona said. Her father frowned. "What kind of promise?" Kona's dark eyes met Ilara's for just a moment before he answered. "Freedom." Something in his tone made the old man look away first. "Then you'll have it when your time is done." Kona inclined his head and left, silent as always. When he was gone, her father said softly, "He's dangerous. Ilara, not for what he'll do, but for what he makes you feel." She turned toward the window, where Kona was already crossing the yard beneath the junipers. "Perhaps," she said. "But danger isn't always something to fear." That night, as the wind sighed through the valley, she found herself awake, thinking of Kona's calm voice, his steady hands, the quiet dignity in his eyes. And though she couldn't name it, something inside her was no longer content with silence. The valley had a golden hush that afternoon, the kind of quiet that held secrets and whispers alike. Ilara walked along the fence line, her hands brushing the rough wood, thinking of Kona's silent presence in the past days. His courage had become a thread in the fabric of her life, unseen but impossible to ignore. She didn't notice the rider at first, a solitary figure coming down the dusted trail. Only when the horse's hooves rattled against the rocks did she stop and squint. The rider wore a long coat, dust-stained and sharp at the edges. The brim of his hat shadowed his face, but the cold glint of recognition struck her immediately. Silas Harlow. Ilara's stomach tightened. She had hoped the storm had swept away more than the debris, that her past could finally stay buried beneath the juniper trees. But here he was, cutting through the air like a shadow, and with him an unmistakable danger. He dismounted with a casual arrogance, boots crunching the gravel. "Ilara Montrose," he said, voice smooth but sharp as a whip. "I hear you've taken a liking to certain company." Her hand instinctively went to the corner of her apron, as if to pull a knife that she didn't carry. "What do you want, Silas?" she asked, voice steady even though her heart raced. He smiled, a cruel twist of lips. "You've been keeping a stranger at your homestead. Interesting choice. The man works for me, or did." Her chest tightened. "Kona is no one's servant, and you have no claim over him." His eyes glinted with calculation. "I have a claim, Ilara, and soon you will too, if you know what's good for you." The words landed like stones in the river of her thoughts. Her mind raced to Kona, his freedom, the promise of safety they had fought for in quiet acts. Silas's presence threatened it all. "Ilara," he said, lowering his voice to a dangerous whisper, "I've come with a proposition. You hand over what's rightfully mine, and no harm will come to your father, or your precious little herd." She felt a wave of anger, fierce and hot. "You think threats will make me obey? I won't let you enslave anyone." least of all Kona. He laughed, a sound that curdled the afternoon air. So noble, so foolish. Then, without another word, he swung onto his horse and disappeared along the ridge, leaving a trail of dust and tension. Ilara sank to the fence post, heart pounding. The golden sunlight no longer comforted her. It seemed to flicker, like the promise of peace had been stolen. That evening, she found Kona repairing the barn door. His hands moved with calm precision, though she could see the subtle tension in his shoulders. She approached him, voice low. "He's back," she said. He paused, setting the hammer down, eyes meeting hers. There was no fear in his gaze, only determination. "Then we prepare, together." For the first time since the storm, Ilara felt the raw weight of the choice before her. But in that shared resolve, she also felt something deeper, a spark of courage, and the quiet certainty that they would face the coming shadows side by side. The valley, once golden and serene, seemed to hold its breath. The night air was thick with the scent of juniper and distant pine smoke. Ilara couldn't sleep, not with Silas's warning echoing in her mind. She wandered through the small orchard behind the farmhouse, hands brushing over the ripening fruit, searching for answers in the quiet rustle of leaves. Kona appeared silently, as if he had known she would come. His shadow merged with hers under the pale moonlight. "I heard him," she whispered. He nodded, eyes scanning the horizon. "He's dangerous, but we've faced worse. Together, we can outsmart him." Ilara's lips pressed into a thin line. "I don't know if it's just about me anymore. He mentioned my father, our herd. If he wants to hurt the people I love." Her voice faltered, and she shook her head. Kona stepped closer, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Then we protect them. Not by hiding, but by being ready. We can't let fear rule us." The night seemed to lean in, listening to their whispered plans. Ilara felt a strange warmth at Kona's words, a thread of hope weaving through the tension. Together they began to map out the old trails and safe paths around the valley. Ways to move unseen, ways to guard what mattered most. As they worked, Ilara found herself remembering the simple joys of life here. The sun on the golden fields, the laughter of neighbors, the quiet hum of bees in the orchard. She realized that Silas wasn't just threatening their present. He was trying to steal the peace they had fought so hard to rebuild, and she would not let that happen. Hours passed, and the first hints of dawn painted the sky in soft pink and lavender. Ilara and Kona finally rested beneath the gnarled branches of an ancient oak. There, in the silence of early morning, they shared a rare moment of levity. "You ever think we'd end up like this?" Ilara asked, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Kona chuckled softly. "I thought my life would be all dust and quiet roads. But then you came along and everything changed." Her heart fluttered, a quiet warmth spreading through her chest. She realized that amidst the fear and danger, a deeper connection had formed, one that Silas could never touch. But the tranquility was fleeting. From the far ridge, a flicker of movement caught Ilara's eye. Shadows stretched unnaturally in the growing light. Silas's return was not a one-time warning. It was a storm brewing on the horizon. Yet in that moment, she no longer felt powerless. She had Kona by her side, and together they had courage, strategy, and a shared purpose. The valley, with all its beauty and memories, was worth every ounce of risk. Ilara stood, determination solidifying in her chest. "We won't run," she said firmly. Kona nodded. "We fight for what's ours, for the valley, for each other." The wind whispered through the orchard, carrying with it a sense of promise. Though shadows lingered, they could not smother the light growing between them. And somewhere deep in the rising sun, the first steps of their resistance began. The sun had barely risen when Ilara and Kona moved quietly through the orchard, their steps careful, hearts pounding in rhythm with the rustling leaves. Today they weren't just planning, they were acting. The threads of Silas's threat were no longer whispers. They had taken shape, tangible and dangerous. Ilara carried a small satchel packed with herbs, a flask of water, and a sharp knife that once belonged to her father. Kona carried a map, edges frayed, that detailed the paths only a few knew. Every detail mattered, Every small precaution could make the difference between survival and disaster. As they reached the edge of the valley, the first sign of Silas appeared, a column of smoke rising from the far ridge. He was testing them, trying to intimidate, to make them doubt their courage. But Elara felt a strange thrill instead of fear. They were ready. Not fully, perhaps, but enough. "Stay close," Kona murmured, his eyes scanning the trees. "We don't know what he's capable of yet." Elara nodded, her hands tightening around the straps of her satchel. "We'll protect the herd. We'll protect everyone." The words were more than a vow. They were a promise to herself, to the valley, to everyone she loved. They moved silently, taking hidden paths, circling back through the underbrush. As they approached a small clearing where the herd grazed, they found signs of intrusion, broken branches, trampled grass. Fear surged for a moment, but then Elara drew a deep breath, grounding herself. "He's testing us," she said. "But we know this land better than he does." Kona gave a small nod, a silent agreement. Together they laid traps, created diversions, and hid the herd in areas only they could navigate. Every action was deliberate, every move calculated to protect what mattered most. Hours passed, the tension thick, but neither faltered. And then from the ridge a figure appeared, Silas, his expression sharp, eyes like flint. He moved with confidence, expecting fear, expecting hesitation. But what he saw instead was unity, resilience, and determination. Elara stepped forward, her chest swelling with courage she didn't know she possessed. "This valley isn't yours," she called, her voice steady, carrying across the clearing. "Leave now, or face what comes." Silas paused, studying her. For a brief moment, there was something unreadable in his eyes, a flicker of doubt, perhaps admiration, or maybe curiosity. But he didn't attack immediately. He withdrew slightly, assessing, calculating. Kona joined Elara's side, his presence a silent shield. "We're not afraid," he said, quiet but firm. And then the moment passed. Silas disappeared into the trees, leaving only the echo of his footsteps behind. The immediate danger had passed, but the threat remained. Elara exhaled, relief mingling with exhilaration. She looked at Kona, and for a moment, the fear, the tension, the uncertainty all melted away. They had stood together, faced the shadow, and survived. "Today we won," she whispered. "Yes," Kona agreed. "But tomorrow we protect even harder. And we stay together." The valley seemed to breathe with them, the wind carrying a quiet promise that no darkness, however threatening, could erase the light they had ignited. The night fell over the valley like a soft, protective blanket, yet beneath its calm, the pulse of danger lingered. Elara sat beside the small fire she had coaxed into life, staring into the dancing flames. Each flicker reminded her of the courage it took to stand up to Silas, and yet, the memory of his cold, calculating gaze kept her heart tight in her chest. Kona knelt nearby, meticulously checking the traps and hiding spots they had set earlier. Every detail mattered, and neither could afford carelessness. "He'll test us again," he said softly, almost to himself. "And next time he might not be so hesitant." Elara's hands trembled slightly as she picked up a smooth stone from the firelight. She held it, feeling its weight, and realized it mirrored the heaviness in her heart, concern for the valley, for the people, and for the delicate hope she clung to. "I'm ready," she whispered. I don't want to fail anyone." Kona looked up, his gaze unwavering, filled with the quiet strength that had become her anchor. "You won't. You're stronger than you think, Elara. We'll face him together." They talked through strategies, considered escape routes, and reinforced the safety of the valley. But as the stars glimmered above, Elara couldn't shake the sense that Silas was closer than ever, that the shadows themselves whispered his name. And then, in the stillness of the night, the softest sound reached her ears, a rustle, deliberate, calculated. Elara froze, sensing movement among the trees. Kona's hand found hers instinctively, a grounding presence amid the uncertainty. "Stay calm," he murmured. "Remember, the night favors those who know its secrets." From the shadows, a figure emerged. Not Silas, but a scout, small and cautious. The tension eased slightly, replaced by curiosity. Alara realized this was the first time she had the upper hand. With careful words and careful gestures, she guided the scout toward a small trap they had prepared. Not to harm, but to teach. The creature, caught yet unharmed, blinked in surprise. Alara's heart softened. "We don't fight for cruelty," she said, her voice firm but gentle. "We fight to protect, not to destroy." Kona nodded, pride warming him from within. Their combined courage had shifted the balance. They were no longer merely reacting, they were guiding the events around them. By dawn, the scout had been released, and the message was clear. The valley was not theirs to claim, and every attempt to intimidate would meet with strength and wisdom. Alara felt a swell of pride, but also a deep emotional connection to the land she was protecting. This was more than survival. It was love, a bond that intertwined with every leaf, every stream, every whisper of the wind. As the first light of morning painted the sky in shades of gold and lavender, Alara and Kona stood together on the ridge, watching over the valley. The challenge was far from over, but for the first time they felt the glimmer of hope shining brighter than any shadow. Alara's voice was quiet but steady. "We can do this. We will do this." And for the first time it felt true, not just as a promise but as a certainty. The shadows could try, but the light within them was stronger. The morning mist hung low over the valley, wrapping the trees and hills in a soft, almost magical veil. But the serenity was deceptive. Alara could feel it in her bones, the tension in the air, the way the birds were unusually silent, the rustle of leaves that seemed almost to whisper warnings. Kona stood beside her, alert and calm, though even he couldn't hide the tightness in his jaw. "He's coming," he said simply, reading the signs of the valley better than anyone. And this time, he won't hold back. Alara swallowed the fear rising in her chest. Every moment they had spent planning, every precaution they had taken, was about to be tested. She clenched her fists, feeling the determination build. "Then we'll meet him head on. Together," she said, her voice strong despite the tremor she felt inside. By midday, the shadows at the edge of the valley began to shift unnaturally, a creeping darkness that seemed to pulse with intent. Silas had arrived, not with threats this time, but with action. His presence was like a storm rolling across the land, bending trees with invisible wind and sending ripples through the streams. Alara and Kona moved swiftly, guiding villagers to hidden safe spots, ensuring no one would be caught unprepared. Her heart ached, seeing the fear in their eyes, but she refused to let it overwhelm her. Every life mattered, and every person's hope depended on her courage. The first confrontation came suddenly. Silas appeared at the ridge, his figure dark against the sunlit mist. His gaze was sharp, assessing, calculating, but there was a flicker, just a flicker of respect. As if he recognized that Alara was no ordinary opponent. "You should have stayed in the shadows." "Alara," he said, his voice smooth and dangerous, "this path you've chosen, it will break you." Alara stood taller, feeling the valley's heartbeat beneath her feet, the quiet power of the land she had sworn to protect. "You underestimate the strength of people who care for each other," she replied. "This valley isn't just land, it's hope. And hope doesn't break." Silas's eyes narrowed, and for a moment time seemed to hold its breath. Then, like lightning, he moved, testing their defenses, probing for weakness. But Alara and Kona were ready. Every trap, every strategy, every bond of trust they had built now became their shield. The battle was not just of force, it was a clash of wills, of hearts. Alara realized that strength alone wouldn't win this day. It was her compassion, her ability to inspire courage in others, that turned the tide. When villagers stepped forward to protect the land, standing beside her with unwavering faith, Silas faltered, unprepared for unity that came from love and loyalty. Hours passed, the storm of conflict rising and falling, until finally Silas stepped back, a grudging acknowledgement in his expression. He had been tested and found that force alone could not conquer what he sought to destroy. Exhausted but triumphant, Alara sank to the ground, Kona kneeling beside her. They had not just survived. They had shown that courage, compassion, and unity could shine even in the darkest hour. The valley was still, the mist slowly lifting. And in that quiet, Elara felt something she had longed for but never dared name. Hope that was not fragile, but unbreakable. The night after Silas's retreat was quiet, but it was not peace. Elara walked through the valley under a sky scattered with stars, the gentle glow of the moon casting silver across the hills. Every shadow seemed alive with memory, of the struggles, the fear, the fleeting moments of doubt, but also of the courage that had carried them this far. Kona followed silently, his presence grounding her. "You saved more than the valley today," he said softly. "You reminded everyone here why we fight, for love, for hope, for each other." Elara nodded, but her thoughts were elsewhere. Silas's eyes had lingered on her in a way that unsettled her, not just with anger, but curiosity, recognition. She couldn't shake the feeling that their confrontation had opened a door, one she hadn't expected. The next morning brought a strange calm. Villagers emerged cautiously, sharing cautious smiles, picking up the pieces of the disrupted lives. Children laughed again, chasing one another through the sun-drenched meadows. Even the animals seemed to sense the change, their cautious steps now lighter, freer. Elara visited the highest ridge of the valley, looking out at the land she had fought to protect. The wind carried whispers of the past, the memories of those who had struggled and fallen, but also the laughter of those who had endured. She realized that the valley's true strength was not in its hills or rivers, but in its people, their resilience, and the love that bound them together. And then, as if drawn by fate, Silas appeared once more, not with malice but hesitance. He stood at the edge of the ridge, watching her, the weight of unspoken words heavy between them. "I see now," he said quietly, his voice almost a confession. "I've been fighting shadows of my own making. You showed me what I've been missing." Elara felt a flicker of emotion she had not expected, understanding, compassion, even the possibility of forgiveness. She stepped closer, her heart steady. "It's never too late to choose differently," she said. "You can still protect instead of destroy. You can still be part of something greater than yourself." Silas looked at the valley, at the people who had stood strong, and for the first time, he seemed unsure. But uncertainty was the first step toward change. Slowly he nodded, a gesture of tentative acceptance. And for the first time, Elara saw not an enemy, but a man capable of redemption. Returning to the village, Elara felt a warmth she had never known, a feeling that came from not just victory, but from hearts uniting in hope. Villagers approached, smiling, offering words of gratitude and relief. Children ran to her, hugging her knees, their innocence a balm to the scars of the past. That night, the valley glowed with lanterns, each flame representing a life renewed, a heart mended, a future reclaimed. Elara stood among them, hand in Kona's, realizing that this was the moment they had all fought for, not the absence of darkness, but the triumph of light. And as the first true dawn of peace broke across the juniper sky, Elara allowed herself to dream of love, of laughter, of days that would be remembered not for the battles fought, but for the joy that followed. The valley had survived. They had survived, and for the first time in a long time, Elara truly believed in happy endings. The morning sun spilled golden light across the valley, and Elara felt a rare sense of stillness in her chest. The battles of the past weeks had left marks, scratches on her arms, bruises on her spirit, but the valley itself seemed to breathe anew, as if every tree, river, and stone shared in the triumph of survival. Villagers moved with purpose now, rebuilding, planting, creating. The air smelled of fresh earth and hope. Children played in the streams, their laughter echoing like music, and even the older villagers smiled more freely, their steps lighter than they had been in years. Elara walked among them, offering hands to help, sharing quiet words of encouragement, and receiving smiles that were warmer than sunlight. Kona stayed close, his presence a steady anchor. "They'll remember this," he said softly, watching a small boy try to climb a hill and tumble back into giggles. "Not just the battles, but the moments like this. The moments that make them strong." Elara nodded, her eyes tracing the horizon. Silas had remained at the edge of the valley since their last conversation, sometimes helping silently, sometimes observing with a wary distance. But there was a new light in his eyes, a glimmer of respect for the lives he had once threatened. He had changed, slowly, painfully, and that change alone felt miraculous. By midday, the villagers had gathered for a festival of sorts, a celebration of survival, of renewal. Lanterns hung from every tree branch, bright against the azure sky. Music drifted through the valley as people danced, sang, and embraced. Alara watched them, her heart swelling with a deep, quiet joy. She realized that the true victory was not just in defeating an enemy, but in reclaiming the heart of their home. Silas approached her, carrying a small bouquet of wildflowers, simple, humble, and yet profoundly meaningful. "For the valley," he said, his voice soft, almost shy. "And for you." Alara accepted the flowers, a small smile tugging at her lips. There were no words needed. The gesture said everything: acknowledgement, gratitude, and the beginning of reconciliation. She felt tears prick her eyes, not of sorrow, but of overwhelming relief and hope. As evening fell, the valley glimmered with 1,000 tiny lights. Families sat together, sharing meals and stories. Children chased fireflies, their laughter weaving into the gentle night air. Alara stood on a small hill holding Kona's hand and looked out across the valley she had fought for so fiercely. "This is what we've been waiting for," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "A life we can cherish, a home we can love without fear." Kona squeezed her hand, smiling. "And it's just the beginning." In that moment, everything felt right. The struggles of the past no longer weighed them down. The valley was alive with promise, and every heart there beat with courage, forgiveness, and hope. Alara finally allowed herself to imagine a future filled with joy, laughter, and love. A future worth fighting for. And somewhere in the distance, Silas watched, a quiet smile on his face. A man transformed, a life redirected, and a world that now held room for him too. The threads of tomorrow were being woven, each one stronger than the last, tying the hearts of the valley together in a tapestry of light, love, and enduring hope. The valley awoke to a gentle sunrise, its first rays painting the river in streaks of gold and amber. The air carried a crisp sweetness, as if the world itself was celebrating a new beginning. Birds sang in harmony, their notes weaving into the soft rustle of leaves, and Alara felt a calm she had never known before. Today was not just another day, it was the day of promise, the day where every struggle, every tear, and every act of courage found its meaning. The villagers gathered in the central square, a sea of familiar faces brimming with anticipation and joy. Children ran ahead, dragging ribbons and flowers, their laughter threading through the crisp morning air like silver bells. Alara stood at the edge of the square, hand in hand with Kona. He squeezed her fingers gently, a silent reassurance that whatever came next, they would face it together. Around them, the valley was alive with energy, alive with love, and alive with hope. Silas approached, no longer distant, no longer hesitant. He carried a small chest, an offering of reconciliation and renewal. "For the valley," he said, voice steady and sincere, "and for the people who taught me what it means to truly belong." Alara's eyes glistened, a smile curving her lips. There was no anger left, no bitterness lingering, only the quiet, radiant light of forgiveness and understanding. The villagers welcomed him with cautious warmth, and soon that warmth blossomed into laughter and conversation, weaving him into the fabric of their lives. As the sun climbed higher, the valley became a canvas of celebration. Tables were set with fruits, breads, and honey, gifts from the fertile lands now restored. Musicians played instruments carved from the valley's wood, their songs rising in joy, marking the triumph of hearts united. Alara watched as Kona knelt before her, pulling a small wooden ring from his pocket, carved from the juniper trees they had loved since childhood. "We've fought so much to protect this place," he said, voice tender but strong. "And now I want to build a life with you here, in this valley, in this home, forever." Tears fell freely from Ilara's eyes, not of sorrow, but of pure, uncontainable happiness. She nodded, her voice trembling. Forever. And as Kona slipped the ring onto her finger, the crowd erupted in joyous applause, their hearts swelling with the same hope and love that filled hers. The day stretched into evening, the sky ablaze with colors more vibrant than any storm could ever paint. Lanterns floated into the heavens carrying wishes and dreams. Families embraced, friends laughed, and even Silas found a quiet corner to watch. A smile of peace on his face, Ilara and Kona stood together atop the hill, looking out over the valley they had fought so hard to protect. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the soft promise of tomorrow. They were surrounded by life, love, and laughter, a tapestry of hope that no darkness could unravel. And in that moment, Ilara understood something simple, profound, and eternal, that no matter the storms, no matter the trials, love, courage, and forgiveness could create a home not just in a valley, but in every heart willing to believe in tomorrow. The juniper sky stretched endlessly above them, a radiant witness to their journey, a silent guardian of the happiness they had earned, and the forever that awaited them.